It's my privilege now to do an introduction for our next speaker, Kay Adams. Kay is passionate about empowering people living with dementia and those entrusted with their care. She has over 30 years of experience counseling and coaching individuals and families around a broad array of complex emotional and health-related challenges. She's worked extensively in the field of geriatrics, hospice, palliative care, and mental health, and has served in a variety of capacities supporting those impacted by dementia since 2001. Kay founded Compassion Works, LLC, to address the huge gaps that exist around educating and supporting family and professional dementia care partners. Her extensive background as a social worker, educator, coach, and speaker enables her to address the diverse and complex experiences for her audiences in a very relatable way. She's known for bringing passion, integrity, storytelling, humor, and a unique authenticity to her work. Kay can make otherwise uncomfortable topics safe and memorable to explore for families and professionals alike. So we're extremely fortunate to have her here with us today. Let's give her a warm welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me okay? So at least I'm not worrying about anybody falling asleep right now because you're all too cold, right? To fall asleep after lunch. It's always hard to talk after lunch, and it's always hard to follow Jane Barton, right? She's amazing. Jane and I met in 2004 when she was an intern at the Denver Hospice, where I was working as a social worker. So I want to start with, I'm going to give you a little bit about my background too, but I want to read you something that is in the preface. I have a book out there that I'm selling, and Jane actually wrote the foreword of my book, Bedside Witness. And I love, Jane, that you use that language witness so much in your presentation, because I really do feel like we are witnessing each other all of the time as caregivers. And this was just the dedication section of my book in the beginning. And I said, to all of the caregivers, past, present, and future, who are the unseen and unsung heroes of our time. Without fanfare, under the radar, and out of the limelight, you play an essential role in our families and society as a whole. More often than not, you are doing this alone, under difficult circumstances and hidden from view, in a culture that is greatly indebted to the gifts you bring and for the gift that you are. For the gifts that you bring and for the gift that you are. Your magnificence is not lost on me and continues to be my motivation and inspiration every day in my work. And I mean those words, just like Jane said. I'm a social worker, clinical social worker forever, but I've been a medical social worker for about 25 years. And I spent 8.5 of those years with the Denver Hospice, and the team I worked on primarily worked with folks that were living in nursing homes, assisted livings, and memory care. And so just by virtue of that job, I had patients that ranged in age from 75 to 103, 104 years old. And a lot of them were impacted by dementia, but not all of them. I worked with lots and lots of people who were impacted by Parkinson's disease and Huntington's disease. And I have a whole list of diseases I hope not to ever get, or ones that might be better. And I have a whole list of patients who have inspired me. Like, if I get dementia, I hope I'm like so-and-so. If I get cancer, I hope I'm like so-and-so, right? I hope I can walk the path like that. So my whole career has really been about being inspired by mentors, like Jane is a mentor for me, by families and by patients of all different illnesses and all different walks of life. Because when you are faced with a life-limiting or life-threatening illness of any kind, it's a game changer, right? It is not a guest that we've invited to our table. It is not a position we say, oh, I hope when I grow up, I get to be a caregiver for someone with Parkinson's or someone with dementia. We don't think about those things, and we certainly don't bring it on ourselves that we want to have these illnesses into our lives, but yet they show up, and we do the best we can. So truly, throughout my 25 years, working in hospice, working in palliative care, working in the Kaiser Memory Clinic. I worked there for 4.5 years. So I was on a specialty team helping to diagnose dementias for Kaiser members. So I was more on the front end of things there instead of the back end of the dementia world. And then my last 1.5 years in Kaiser, I was the home-based dementia specialist here in Denver. So then I found myself driving around in Denver traffic everywhere, doing home visits for people who were living with some form of dementia, supporting their caregivers, doing education and all of that. It was pretty much a dream job. But the one thing that really got me was everybody needed a lot of help and a lot of ongoing support. And there was one of me and thousands of Kaiser members. And so no one ever let go of my card. They kept calling me, can't you come back out and visit again? Can't we make another appointment with you? And I had to say no every time. And that made me crazy. Compassion fatigue, all of those things. I felt so much for those families, and my hands were kind of tied in my job role. So I jumped ship from Kaiser in the fall of 2018. May have not done that had I known a pandemic was coming around the corner. Interesting time to start a business. So I started my business called Compassion Works in the spring of 2019. And like many other people, I've had to pivot what I do in that amount of time. Before that, I never worked on Zoom. But since then, that's pretty much, I live on Zoom all day long. And I am privileged to work with care partners, not just in Denver, which is what I used to do, but all across the country and internationally. Because guess what? Now, Parkinson's has no borders, dementia has no borders. There's, it's not recognized by it ends the United States. It's people in Ireland and England and Canada and Brazil. It's all over the place, these illnesses. And so I'm lucky enough to help families and support them over Zoom calls around these illnesses and to do a lot of workshops and training. And so that's what I've been doing for the last, 7-8 years. And I am truly inspired by the people that I work with, the people living with different illnesses, especially around dementia. And when I decided to go out on my own, I picked that particular illness. One is because I'm always attracted to what's the hardest job. Let me go for that one, right? What's one of the most misunderstood illnesses? What's one of the hardest caregiving roles, I think? And in my practice, what I think is that caregivers or care partners of any kind are really the unsung heroes, but particularly when it comes to dementia, because there's a lot of disparities that happen with diseases that affect the cognition and the memory and the executive functioning skills that don't necessarily apply to somebody who's dying of cancer or lung disease or heart disease. So you're not on a level playing field as care partners, depending on your situation with your family member. So I've learned a lot, pretty much the hard way over the course of my career about the power of boundaries and empathy and trying to prevent burnout, because I can't even tell you how many times I've been burnt out in my career as a social worker. I've worked some really tough jobs over the years, and I burn out over and over again. And one thing that hospice really taught me was what stereotype of people in hospice is that we have wings underneath our jackets, right? We're angels. I don't know how many thousands of times I heard that term. And I'm truly not an angel. Anybody who knows me knows that's true. But you do have to be heart-led to do that kind of work. And it does take a lot. It does take a lot of compassion. It does take a lot of empathy. And trying to figure out how to balance that was difficult, because sometimes I would say to my boss, I feel like my nice pills have worn off and it's only Tuesday morning at 9. And you're not allowed as a hospice worker to ever have a bad day. You're always supposed to be upbeat and positive and supportive, even if your gas tank feels empty, right? And so I had to learn a great deal about self-care, self-compassion, compassion fatigue, all of these kinds of things in my work. And I'm going to share some of that with you today. And hopefully you're going to get even more tools to add to the toolbox there. Okay, let's see if I can coordinate this slideshow as well as Jane did. All right. All right, did I do it? Okay. So this is what I hope to cover here right now is to, oops, I didn't do it. Jane, you were too good at this. Okay, understand why boundaries are our friends. A lot of times we think about boundaries as like keeping people out, but why boundaries are our friends and how to set them. And then to apply the 4 steps of empathy. These come from Brene Brown. You guys know Brene Brown? She's one of my heroes. Apply the 4 steps of empathy to our role as care partners. And then to recognize the signs of caregiver burnout. So it's very similar to what Jane was talking about, only with a little bit of a twist and ways to avoid it. Because as a professional caregiver or as a family caregiver, my mom just died in December. And so I was a family caregiver as well. My dad died of cancer. I was a caregiver then. And if we live long enough, we're all going to be care recipients and we're all going to be caregivers, right? And I learned so many powerful lessons from the people that I've worked with over the years about those roles. So when it comes to, when you think about the word boundary, just yell something out. What is a boundary? Anybody? What do you think? Stop sign is a boundary. I thought it was slow tires on pavement. No. Okay. What else? What? Limits. Setting a limit is a boundary. What else? What? Protection is a boundary, right? We have to protect ourselves. Anything else that comes to mind? Communication? Communication can be a boundary. So there's all kinds of boundaries that are out there. So some of those boundaries are more on the personal side of things, our comfort level around other people, and the lines we draw for ourselves. So there's not a right or wrong. So for some people, especially the more introverted folks, maybe, meeting somebody for the first time, you might not be like inclined to hug the person when you meet them, right? If you're in physical contact with them, you might need more distance, you need more time, you need more space around you. For screaming extroverts like me, I don't need much of that. I can meet people and hug them right away, unless the energy field is such that I feel like I need to set a boundary because it doesn't feel comfortable, right? So some of the boundaries that we have to set are physical. So what is the space like around us? How to relate to other people around us? And then verbal interactions. How do we expect people to treat us? So I have a teenage son who's, whoa, I'm behind again, who's generally wonderful, but he's 15. And so sometimes he gets really snarky with me, and sometimes he gets really rude with me. And I have to step back with the mama role and remind him, I'm not going to be spoken to like that, right? I have to set that limit, have to set that boundary, so he doesn't think over and over that he can just do that, right? Because I want to have a respectful, mutually respectful relationship with him. So I don't yell at him, and I don't scream at him, and I don't cuss at him, and I expect the same in return, right? So that is a healthy boundary. And then we have personal space. See if I can get that up. Okay, so personal space, how close we want people around us in our little bubbles, right? So sometimes, like I just came back from a flight this week, and the train going through DIA was packed. It was absolutely packed. And I felt like I was in a cattle truck or something, and my boundaries felt really violated. Like I didn't look at anybody. I was staring at the floor. I was just uncomfortable. Too many people, too crowded in, not comfortable. So part of that boundary setting is what happens in our personal space. So with boundaries, they change depending on the situation that we're in, right? So they're fluid, they're flexible. So we might not have the same boundaries at work, what we might share personally, what we might talk about, the language we use or whatever. That may not be the same as how we would conduct ourselves at home, right? Now I work from home, so I guess my boundaries are all mixed up because I don't have anybody but myself to report to. But usually there's a very clear distinction between a workplace boundary and what we might use at home. And then when we're visiting family, right? Or if we're visiting friends or we're hanging out with people, how we interact, how we conduct ourselves may be very different. So friends that I've known for 30, 40 years, I may act one way in their company with somebody I've known for 6 months, right? And so we're constantly shifting about how we present ourselves and what our comfort levels are. And here's some boundaries we're going to go into today a little bit deeper about that we can all, I think, relate to. And I'm doing bad up this slide. Okay. The first one is emotional boundaries, protecting our emotional well-being, which Jane has been talking a lot. It's not an option, right? Self-care is not optional. And then protecting our physical space around us. And as caregivers, that can be very challenging sometimes. And then this one, I think, is a really big one, is time. Protecting the use and misuse of time. Really hard. When Jane was talking about not enough time, the 5-minute plan, I love that. The 15-minute plan. And then the other one, you can do it. is workplace. Am I on the right slide? No, gosh, guys, I'm so sorry. I'm not doing very well on this. Okay. What was that? I'm on the previous slide. Jane, come up here. No, I'm kidding. Okay. How about this one? Let's just go here. Okay, so with our physical space, do you think about that much, protecting your physical space? I don't know. For me right now, the world feels a little like unsafe. So I feel like I'm protecting that space a little bit more than I normally do. So we have to have our emotional boundaries. And hold on, try this again. Okay. So with our emotional well-being, this is one of the toughest things with care partners that I work with, is how do we prioritize ourselves? And Jane was talking about that. How do we nurture our own selves? And what I really learned in hospice and palliative care and all the other jobs I've had is everybody asks about the person who has an illness, and seldom do they ask about how the care partner is doing. Do you guys find that to be true? A lot. So I feel like there's an invisible army out there of people who need validation, who need to be seen, who need to be celebrated, who need to be recognized, but often aren't, because we're always just asking, how's John, or how's Betty, or how's Sue, and no one says, how are you, right? How are you? And not the kind of I call that hit and run. How are you? It's like, hey, how you doing? And you go off. No, the how are you, and you sit, and you're present, and you really listen. So that is a really important thing for us as caregivers to keep in mind. Like Jane said, we can't all sleep 8 to 9 hours a night, right? We can't always get great food or do mindfulness meditations for an hour a day, but there are little things that we can do and build in. Building a strong support system is super important. I'm always talking about building a care team and building a care team early. And for how many of you, just honestly in this room, have trouble asking other people for help? Right. And most people will say that. It's a skill, like any other skill. But I'm always talking with my coaching clients and families about asking for help is a skill. We're all going to need help. And the sooner you start learning to ask for that help as a care partner, the more of a team you're going to have, the more support you're going to have, the more gas in your tank, and the better care you're going to be able to give. And then just talking about seeking professional help when needed. So sometimes we struggle with boundaries. I know when I worked for Kaiser, for some of my years with Kaiser, I was a therapist, mental health therapist. And sometimes people would just push my buttons, my patients that came in to see me, like they had totally different worldviews. I did. That supports your well-being. And I think a lot of times what happens is we get so busy just with our caregiving, with our lives, we don't really take the intention for that. So I just moved for the second time in 6 months, 2 weeks ago, and I'm being very intentional about setting boundaries. What comes into my new place? What kind of energy? What kind of people, right? And it's making me have some Zen moments that I wasn't experiencing for a while with my mom's death and other things that have been going on. So that includes safeguarding your belongings, establishing personal space, and a comfortable environment. So I, like Jane, am a pet lover, right? So I have a dog that I love more than life. And I had to leave town after only living in my new place for 5 days. I left town for a week. So I had to invite somebody into my new space to take care of my dog. So this is a good example of this personal space. So you have to have somebody you trust, and you might feel that way about bringing in outside caregivers, right, into your house. How can I trust this person? How can I set a boundary? How can I make sure everything's going to be okay in my absence? And we have to work on that, and it's clunky. If any of you have brought in outside care into your home, it's like they don't do it the same way, right, as we do. And so we have to learn about how to adjust to these different things when we're setting these boundaries. All right. So then it's protecting the use of our time. And this one, I think, is one of the hardest ever to do. So to effectively protect our time, that means we have to prioritize tasks, right? We have to put what is burning and on fire that we have to do other than other things. It might not be cleaning the drawers or the closets or all those things. And we need to minimize distractions and allow other people to help you, right? So one way to do that is to delegate, to ask other people. And for a lot of caregivers, I find that really hard, especially if it's a spousal situation. Like I took the vows, I said for better and worse, so therefore I have to do everything. And I want to say BS to that because we are all going to need help. It takes a village to care for someone living with diseases like Parkinson's, or especially with dementia that last a very long time and get very complex. So we have to set realistic goals, and we have to learn to say no. Anybody else have trouble saying no in here? Right? And one of the things that I learned in hospice about saying no is I used to joke with my nursing colleagues. A lot of times nurses, like, families would say, oh, could you just come in and visit, one more time this weekend because my son is flying in from Boston and he would love to meet you, but the nurse is only on shift from Monday through Friday, right? And sometimes those nurses would go, or other people on the team. But when they asked me that same question, and it was hard because you had really tight relationships with people, and they asked me that same question, I would be like, if I come in on my weekend, I don't have any recovery time for me. I can't give to you what I don't have. I can't give from an empty cup. So I have to use my weekends to refresh myself, to fill my own bucket back up so that I can give to my patients and families. So I'm sorry, I can't come this weekend, right? So that took a lot of practice to try to set these boundaries and to allocate, to other people. So the other thing that applies is just protecting our time at work for those of you that are in the workplace. So I have worked in so many environments that were full of workplace drama. Full of work. I mean, as a social worker, I kind of attract drama, and the joke a lot of times in the hospice with my nurses and sometimes with the chaplains is like, if it's a family crisis, if it's a hot situation with the family, call the social worker, right? Because it's an emotional issue that they're needing help with and support around. And that's what we're trained to do. So we're trying to set work environments that are zen, that are calm, and that aren't filled with drama. And that's often challenging, especially in caregiving and healthcare. Healthcare is not in a great space right now. So sometimes there's a lot of drama that we have to put up with that. So we've all struggled from time to time, professionally or personally, with setting boundaries. And I will tell you a little story for sure of my own issue with that. And this is a story from my book, Bedside Witness, that is called The Hospice Daughter in here. And I'd probably only worked in hospice maybe 6 months. So before hospice, I'd come from youth corrections. Not exactly a normal job transition, right? From delinquent youth to hospice. So I'd never been around anybody who was dying. I'd never, did home visits, these intimate home visits in people's homes and facilities and all these kinds of things. And I learned over time that I knew in about 30 minutes or less which patients I was going to fall in love with and they're going to break my heart. And you aren't supposed to have favorites, but I did, right? There was just certain people you just connected to. And there was a woman in the book, I call her Ruthie. And she lived in probably the only little trailer house somewhere down in Greenwood Village or somewhere, like mansions around her. And she had this little humble trailer house that she lived in with her husband. And she was dying of lung cancer and had just been diagnosed with cancer the week before I met her. And from the second I walked into her house, I don't know what it was about her, but I just fell in love with her. And she had this ginormous cat. It was fatter than Garfield. It was this huge cat, and it slept in a bassinet. It was the love of her life. And she even had stairs that the cat could climb to the kitchen table, and it was always laying in the middle of the table when we would talk. And she just had the warmest heart. She had 8 children, like 15 grandchildren. She was the matriarch of the family, and she exuded love out of every pore. She was just so warm and kind. And I had grandparents that were more standoffish, that weren't super close like that, who weren't real open emotionally because of the day, the depression, all of that kind of stuff. But she wasn't like that. And she started introducing me to her family members as, this is my hospice daughter, Kay. This is my hospice daughter. Well, that's kind of a funky boundary, right? It was the biggest compliment somebody could have given me, but this is my hospice daughter. And I loved that so much. And one time my parents came to visit from Nebraska. They came out to Colorado to visit. Guess what I did? I took my mom to visit her. I didn't tell my boss, but I took my mom because I loved this woman so much and I wanted mom to meet her. And on the day she died, I was there for 5 hours attending her death. And my supervisor finally said, you need to leave. So my supervisor had to set the boundary for me, right? So, and that was a real growth experience for me, a real learning experience, because I care so much that sometimes it takes me down. And I had compassion fatigue and burnout for quite a while after that experience because I gave so much of myself away in that relationship. So it takes for all of us a lot of courage to create healthy boundaries. It takes a lot. And we have to practice over and over and over to do that, right? And even if we get it right half the time, that's really good. And part of that, at least part of my struggle with boundaries, is empathy. So we've talked a lot about that today. I empathize, over-empathize with people. It was something that I've had to learn to put a boundary around because I wore my heart on my sleeve my whole life. And my mom used to say, "Kay, you just can't care so much." But now it's my caring that makes me good at what I do, but yet I have to temper it. I can't fall in love with everybody when they die. That wouldn't work, right? So I have to learn how to temper that. So when we talk about empathy, there's all different ways to look at it, but it's really about walking in somebody else's shoes, putting yourself in their position, wondering what it might be like to be them, right? To be living the life they're living. And Brene Brown is one of my heroes, and she has 4 steps she talks about for building empathy. And we're going to go through these steps one by one here. And the first one is perspective taking. So I love this slide. The dog's on one side of the window, the cats are on the other. They have very different views of life, right? So it's being able to see the world through the eyes of the other, walking in their shoes. And sometimes that's hard because particularly with illnesses that can have a lot of cognitive changes, which can come with Parkinson's, or a lot of folks that have later stage Parkinson's may develop Lewy body dementia, for instance, where it does really affect cognition and relationships and functioning skills. It's hard to see things from the same perspective anymore. And sometimes it's hard for your friends or family members to see things from the same perspective that you do. So being able to have empathy for someone requires us to try to see things from their perspective. And then the next one is just staying out of judgment. And Jane talked about that. Staying out of judgment, because what happens is we make up stories, right, about why people are doing something that they're doing or not doing. And so it's trying to just be an open slate. Try not to make up a story, try not to have an agenda, but just say, help me understand what's going on, right? An invitation, not a judgment. And the next one is recognizing the emotions someone else is feeling. So it means looking into ourselves. And some of us are really well practiced in this. I had a lot of experience professionally before I went into hospice, but boy, was that the best training ground ever for sitting with discomfort, sitting with grief, being with people in pain, physically, emotionally, spiritually, all those things, and trying to really get that sense of what they might be feeling so I could better support them. And the last step Brene Brown talks about is communicating that you understand an emotion. And this, in my world of dementia, can be really hard because maybe the person, let's say a husband has Alzheimer's and the wife is the caregiver, and they're not able to communicate very well anymore because of brain changes. And maybe the person with dementia doesn't even understand the sacrifices that you're making as a care partner. And there's all this tension and stuff. So it's hard to be a good listener or have a lot of empathy for each other sometimes when these factors play in. And what I learned over time in hospice is that for all of us, sometimes we just see a snapshot of things that go on. We don't see the big picture, but our mind likes to make up stories anyway. And another person that I learned a lot from in hospice was a daughter that I met one time. And her mom had end-stage dementia, and she was bedridden, and she didn't talk anymore. She didn't walk. Couldn't feed herself, anything. And she was in the process of dying the day I met her. And when I met the daughter in the room, she kept saying to me, "That's not my mom in that bed over there. My mom died 7 years ago when the dementia hit." And I didn't understand what that meant because I'm like, of course it's your mom. Her name's on the door, but I didn't understand all the micro losses that went on in that family for the last 7 years. I was just there at the very end of that story. And so it really helped me understand when we're on these long caregiving journeys, how it can change people and how they can show up differently. Instead of jumping to conclusions about this daughter might have dementia or she's crazy, she was educating me. Does that make sense? And it was very powerful. So when we talk about perspective taking, it can be a double-edged sword like Jane talked about, because if we care too much and we have our hearts are wide open, then how do we protect ourselves from compassion fatigue and from burnout? And it's something that you never just get it down pat. You know, sometimes I think I have great boundaries and I'm setting them, and then suddenly I'm falling apart, just like Jane described. And I have to have my friends reel me back in exactly like that. So we need people to help us. We need people to help us see a perspective if we're getting off course. And if you don't have somebody like that in your life, I really encourage you to try to develop some of those relationships, people that you can trust to give you the straight up answer, right? Not sugarcoat anything, but do it out of love, right? I think you're being a little rough on them, or I think you're being rough on yourself. I find that to be a big one. The self-compassion, anybody else struggle with self-compassion in here? Yeah, something like this. We're worried about saying that. So I use this example a lot in trainings, is that if you have 10 caregivers on a block, so 10 houses, everybody's doing caregiving in each of those houses, but only one of the 10 is caregiving for someone with a cognitive disorder or dementia, you're not having the same experience as the other 9 people. If the other 9 people's family members still recognize them, if they can still dress themselves and feed themselves and carry on conversations, maybe in the bed or in a wheelchair, it's not the same as the family member who no longer recognizes you. So I'm always saying you got to find your tribe. You got to find people that can support you on your unique caregiving journey, especially if it involves any cognitive changes. Because 50% of people who have dementia never know they have it, even in the very early stages. They never know they have it. It's not denial. They don't know they have it. Those who do know something's different feel really anxious or angry or scared that someone's hijacked their brain and they don't know what's happening. And there's actually a term for this, and it's called anosognosia. And that means having no knowledge of the disease. So it's really a cognitive skill that they can't see it no matter what happens. They don't know anything's wrong with them. And that really helps. It does not help with perspective taking, because you're trying to keep them safe and they think they're safe and they're not, right? So there's a lot of conflict that can come up with families because of that. All right, so have any of you guys experienced that with anosognosia, that you have somebody in your life with dementia that doesn't know they have it? Is it frustrating? Yeah, it's very frustrating with that. So staying out of judgment is another one. So when we make up that story instantly, when we go to a place that isn't healthy and we start, our own story starts driving it, that can create stress for us when we're in judgment. So trying to stay out of it. And we're kind of in a culture right now, in a world there's lots of judgment and there's lots of pointing fingers, right? There's lots of taking sides. So we really have to be mindful to practice that. And then trying to recognize the emotions someone else is feeling. Again, this is a really important skill for empathy, but often challenging in the world of dementia, but it takes practice. And I work with families a lot around that. And these are some of the difficult emotions that I find people that I work with dementia, and particularly their care partners, are experiencing all the time. And some of those include guilt and remorse, sadness, depression, anger, right? It's like, I didn't sign up for this. I don't understand what's going on. And they need support of being able to name that in a safe, non-judgment zone to talk about what they're struggling with. Some other emotions, I love the dog that's overwhelmed, right? I'm overwhelmed. I've never done this before. It keeps changing. Every time I get something down pat, it changes again. Resentment, fear, loneliness. And again, we don't want you to be lonely. We don't want you to be isolated. We want you to reach out for help as caregivers. So again, just emphasizing, trying to communicate that you understand an emotion, trying to get other people to understand your emotions so they can support and validate you. That is also very important. Because if you have cognitive dementia, it does change everything. It's not something that a person can control. It's not the same for every person. And it's not a mental illness, but is really, really hard. So a few things about supporting people with burnout that just kind of echo what Jane was saying, is that caregiver burnout or compassion fatigue is emotional, mental, spiritual, everything. and when we provide care for another person, particularly over a long period of time. So burnout can happen to all of us, even those of us who've been doing this for a very long time. It can sneak up on you. And some of the symptoms that I'll add to Jane's list are cynicism, reduced feelings of empathy, like flatlining, I think Jane referred to it as, feeling isolated, misunderstood. And that's one of the things with dementia care partners that they say to me all the time: I don't feel like anybody understands the shoes I'm in. No one understands, no one gets it. So you have to seek support specific to that illness so that someone does get it. Withdrawing from family and friends, changes in eating or sleeping patterns. And then, let's see here. I like this one, this woman here. I feel like that some days. Those other common symptoms, I'm going to pull my hair out of this, right? Increased irritability and resentment, chronic physical and emotional fatigue that Jane talked about, unexplained physical ailments, headaches, stomach aches, all those kinds of things that can be stress related. And some other common symptoms. Sorry. Oh, ways to avoid it. Let's talk about that. All right, so these are going to sound similar, but building your knowledge and skills. So if you're caring for someone with Parkinson's, if you're caring someone with dementia or some other thing, the more you understand about the illness, knowledge is power, right? So the more you can understand that, that is a way to reduce your stress and burnout, whether that's dementia or Parkinson's. Trying to eat healthy is another way of doing that, which again, how much time do we have to do that all the time? Not always. But trying to do that and trying to take time off. Jane talked about the Colorado Respite Coalition getting respite, but sometimes to get respite, you have to ask for it. You have to ask for what you need, and that's another skill that I work with people around. All right, so ways to avoid burnout. So connecting with family and friends, building that care community that we've both talked about, reaching out for help, to process your feelings, to be real, to be authentic, in a safe zone. It's so important for our mental health to do that. And then to practice self-care and self-compassion on a regular basis. Those of you who have worked with me in coaching know that I really preach this a lot, having compassion. When we lose it, when we say, you just asked me that for the 100th time, don't ask me that again. We slam a door and walk out, and then we beat ourselves up for the next 3 days, right? We have to practice some self-compassion because we're not robots. We're human beings who care a lot. And then celebrating what you have or still have. Teepa Snow, you guys know Teepa Snow at all? She's a dementia expert. One of the things she talks about is the donut or the whole. We can look, the whole represents what you've lost with your person who has Parkinson's or dementia. The things they can't do anymore, the things that aren't accessible anymore. And it's important to grieve those losses, but it's also important to recognize what you still have and to celebrate what you still have and build that in as a gratitude practice on a daily basis. It'll change your perspective in a positive direction. And the taking time to grieve is really important. One thing, Jane mentioned grief and ambiguous loss. A lot of times caregivers I work with don't even know they're grieving because our culture thinks we only grieve after something has happened, after a death, after a divorce, we're empty nesters, but we're grieving all along. We're wired to grieve if we care. And the more we care, the more we grieve. So getting support about that and taking time for that is really important. And just the ending here, as I'm going to talk about just the power of laughter. Those of you who know me know that one of my favorite things to do is laugh, for sure. And there's a lot of physical benefits of laughter. And so some of those include, it increases heart health, reduces physical pain. I'm all for that. Improves sleep, boosts immunity so that we aren't so susceptible to other illnesses. Laughter really can be a good medicine. Other things laughter can do is to relieve stress. We've had comedians throughout time. It's the court jesters. There's a reason we like to laugh. We like to go to people who make us feel good. And it reduces our stress and improves memory. Laughing improves memory. That's not in the literature very much, is it? But it's important and it helps. And then some more benefits. It brings people together. So when we are laughing together, we're in a joined experience, right? And that's, so if we're in a room, or music, right? We're all listening to the same music, it moves us and we feel connected to each other. So all of these things help to add positivity, to understand ourselves, to understand other people, and they're a good stress relief. So what I did to survive during COVID was watch Robin Williams reruns, Carol Burnett reruns, Dick Van Dyke, all kinds of things that made me laugh every day, at least 5 minutes or sometimes 5 hours, because there was nothing else to do, right? It just was part of my self-care package. And so I also work with people just, to manage stress and resilience as a care partner, you have to adapt your expectations of yourself and of your loved one. And I think it's easier to adapt our expectations of our loved one with Parkinson's or dementia than it is of ourselves. We have to set the bar way up here when in fact we can't always operate on that, right? Because we're depleted, like Jane said, every part of us, this total exhaustion. So taking care of yourself, so important, not optional. Building skills, and then recognizing what you can and can't control, because for those of us in the crowd that like to control everything, it's an energy drain when we can't. And if you have somebody with a progressive illness, we can't stop that, right? But we can do a lot of things to make it better and to make our own lives better in the process. So self-care is not optional. It is not a selfish act. It is an act of self-preservation. Absolutely. So I am just going to leave you with the words that, taking care of yourself is a good, healthy boundary, and it's very good for you. So I would say I applaud all of you guys for coming out here today to be here, because guess what? That's self-care. Anybody else feel like it's self-care? Being here, right? Getting some education, getting some community, getting out of the house, changing the scenery around you. It's so beneficial. And if we don't put it on our calendars as care partners, it's not going to happen. Absolutely not going to happen. And so we have to build that into our day, even if it's in 5-minute, 10-minute, 15-minute increments. So I do have a few minutes left here, so I'm going to take time for questions if anybody has any about anything I've been talking about. Yeah. You guys have a microphone's coming your way, sir. Hold on one second.
When you talked about the Alzheimer's, if a person that you're caring for has Parkinson's and is exhibiting things that look toward Alzheimer's, how can you tell whether it's not just drug related? Because they take so many different drugs, especially pain drugs and that type of thing, which can also cause that. And I know, you can be tested, but if your partner is not wanting to know or not admitting any of this, any suggestions?
A lot of people won't go in for testing. A lot of people don't want to have that diagnosis, or they don't have access to it. That's another big barrier. So that's what I do a lot of education around that. What does that look like? Because you're absolutely right. Different things can mimic depression. Medication effects, absolutely. Depression, anxiety, there's lots of things that left untreated really mess with our cognition and our thinking and our ability to process information and then respond to the environment around us. So those are good questions for the physician, for sure. I'm noticing this in my loved one, because maybe the side effect is maybe a little bit of confusion, but now they don't even know what day of the week it is. And maybe they were a CPA and they can't do their checkbook anymore. And there's things that are more glaring and outside of just the realm of a little bit of side effects from meds. And this is more of a red flag. And so to try to get information from your provider about, what are the normal side effects we might expect? And then is this outside of that normal range? And if so, what can I do to get more information so I know how to support them?
Oh, thank you. Think hospice daughter for a second. And I want to hear you talk a little bit more about giving too much of yourself away, and then you had to get that back, and it took some time. I thought that was interesting.
Oh gosh, you could be here all day if I talked about that. But I think for all of us still in my work, so I work with people all over the country with dementia, and it's very stressful. People are very stressed out that I work with because they're in challenging situations, and I'm trying to be the calm in the storm. And but there are days when I find that if I give too much of myself away, early in the morning and I have afternoon clients, I don't have anything left to give them. So I have to pay attention. I really have to know my own limits. And so I might have to just be like, okay, I'm taking a 15-minute walk in the middle. It wasn't my plan, but that's what I'm doing. I'm getting out in the sunshine. I'm calling a friend. I'm going to watch a 5-minute video and laugh. I'm going to do things to, if I can recognize it in time, so that I can pull back and not get to that limit. I was back with my mom for 5.5 weeks in December before she died. And I was still trying to work some remotely. And there were days when I just had to call my clients and say, I can't stop crying today. I'm sorry, I can't meet with you. I don't have it to give today. And I had to be really transparent and really vulnerable, but there were no two ways about it. And so I had to set different limits. And even when I came back and started working after my mom's funeral in January, I couldn't see many people a day because I was so drained from the grief process that I didn't have much to give. So I had to set a boundary to say, I'm sorry, I know you really need to talk to me this week, but I'm not available till next week. And hopefully I'm available then. Does that make sense? So I still make errors, I still make mistakes, but I'm trying to learn from my past mistakes to not repeat them as glaringly as I did. Yeah.
I have
Anything
a
else?
question over
Yeah.
here. Hi there. Thank you again. One thing you have not touched upon, and I guess I'm just going to make a comment. In many of our Colorado communities, we have support groups as well as care partner groups that meet monthly. And the friends that I have received help with are from the care partners that we meet monthly with. And it's a lot of times it's laughing at each other and you're like, you're not going to believe what just happened.
Right. You got to do that.
Yeah. And everybody will start laughing and they're like, oh yeah, that happened to me. And you feel like you're not the only one out there dealing with this.
Absolutely.
And the support group offers a lot of information, and care partners, of course, is just like today, your spouse or your loved one that is suffering does not get to come to those meetings. So you can talk freely.
Thank you.
It is a wonderful outlet for me anyway.
Yeah, because if you talk to people that are speaking your language and you don't have to make up stories and you don't have to act tough and you can just be real, and share some laughs and share some, compare notes on things, it's super powerful. It's probably some of the best medicine ever out there. Thank you for saying that.
We've got a question here.
Yeah.
Suggestions for not feeling guilty when you set your boundaries.
Oh, guilt is the number one emotion I talk to care partners about. Especially women. Men, you're not off the hook on guilt either, but women in particular, I think we're socialized a lot that we're supposed to be infinitely patient and kind and generous and put ourselves at the bottom of the list always, right? And so if we do something out of character or is not the way we'd like to show up, we feel tremendous guilt about it. And so I think you just have to have a safe place to process that. What I try to do is validate that. I try to normalize that for people. Your response was normal under the circumstance of you have had 3 hours of sleep in the last 2 days. Your loved one asks you the same questions repeatedly all day long. You're over functioning for everything that they do. You are not, have a stellar energy level. We are not showing up at our best. And so you have to give yourself some grace. And so that's what I do a lot, is just try to work with that guilt. So instead of adding to your suffering, which is what people do, they heap it on, add to their suffering. You don't need any more suffering. There's plenty to go around, right? But just to be able to release it, to work to release that is what I work with people to do. I don't have a magic wand to make it go away, but it's something you can work with and improve. Anybody else? Yeah.
Like you have the opportunity to walk away and say, I don't have anything to give, so I can't deal with this right now.
Yeah.
But I think most of us, we're live-ins.
Yes.
We can't just say, sweetheart, I got nothing today, so you're on your own.
Right.
It
Absolutely.
doesn't quite work. What do you suggest for us to do? I mean, we can take our 5 minutes or we could take a walk around the block, but some of us can't leave our partner for that length of time either because they may wander off or they may do something harmful to themselves.
Yes.
So it's like, how do you speak to that?
Yeah, great question. That's where the care team comes in. It's where you have support. I always say it takes a village, especially with a disease like dementia. You just can't do it alone forever. And the worse that the person gets into their disease, the more progressed the disease is, the more help you need to bring in so that you can take breaks, so that you can get away, whether that's paid help or that's, getting respite grant, help, or neighbors or friends or somebody from church. But then again, that often what I find is that people don't ask for that early on. Oh, I got it, I can handle it. And then they're underwater. And then there's no one to ask because they haven't been able to take that time or didn't know to start that care team early on. And then if we have that whole thing about we have trouble asking for help, we never pick up that phone. So if you start getting that earlier and massaging that muscle, building that muscle of asking for help and being vulnerable, being willing to be vulnerable and not have to do it all ourselves, then you could just call somebody, I need a 10-minute break. Can you come over and sit with Jim while I'm here? I'm just losing it today. Can you come, if you have, let's say, a relative out of state, can you come and spend a weekend? I need a break. I am seriously on the edge, right? And so that takes vulnerability. That takes transparency. That's hard to do. But if you start doing that stuff early, it's so much easier to ask for it because most people I work with are caring for people at home too. And the whole 5-minute I can't get away or 2-minute shower is real. But yet, if we built some systems in place, even some technology can help, different cameras, monitors, different things like that, so you can see what the person's doing when you're out of the room, different things like that, so that you can get the break that you need as much as possible. Yeah.
Just curious, if you treat people differently that have Lewy body dementia versus Alzheimer's?
I don't know if I understand your question.
No. Do you distinguish how you treat someone with the different aspects of the disease, whether it's Parkinson's, Lewy bodies, or the
Treat as in medically or treat?
caregiver?
As a coach, like a dementia coach, an educator? Okay. Well, not all dementias are the same and the stressors are different. So Lewy body acts differently than Alzheimer's disease does or frontotemporal dementia does. So I'm primarily working with the care partners, majority of my work, and not the person living with dementia directly. So I'm always trying to help educate and support the care partner around this is different because like Lewy body comes with lots of hallucinations oftentimes. Really big changes in cognition and abilities and things like that. It's a different kind of roller coaster ride than Alzheimer's, for instance. And so I'm trying to help educate them and support them through those changes that they're going through so that they can do a better job of caregiving for the person and also for caring for themselves. So it depends on, sometimes there's really troubling symptoms that are going on that are really acute and scary. And sometimes they're more low-level things that are happening. But if someone's like paranoid or thinking someone's trying to kill them or, there can be really tough situations. So yes, I treat each one of those uniquely and each person I'm working with uniquely because even if I worked with 100 people with Lewy body, no one family story is the same. It's unique to that family. Yeah. Anything else? All right. Well, I want to thank the Parkinson's Association, the Rockies, for having me here today. If I can be of help to anybody, that's my website information. So I work mostly in the realm of dementia, but I work with all kinds of illnesses and as a coach and educator. And my mission in life is to support caregivers in particular and to help make your lives better. So you can reach me on my website. I give free 30-minute consults, Zoom or phone. So if I can be of any support to any of you guys, please look me up. Okay. Thank you.
wonderful presentation with the practical applications that I think all of you have tips you can go back and immediately try to implement. So thank you. All right, so we're going to do some closing statements, and I'm going to tell you what's going to happen next. Before I get into this, I would just personally like to thank all of the Parkinson's Association of the Rockies team. You've seen them all in their black shirts for this amazing conference. You guys have done an amazing job. So let's give them a round of applause. And we want to thank our speakers today for those fantastic presentations. And a big thank you again to the presenting sponsors, Supernus and HCA Health One. And then I just want to thank you, and you need to give yourselves a round of applause for taking the initiative to come today to learn and grow. And you're really the true heroes. So give yourself a round of applause.